Let's open up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figure of the HK-87 Assassin Droid from Ahsoka, VC294. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. As a big fan and collector of the Vintage Collection action figures, sometimes I keep them in their packaging for a little while longer than I probably should because I know that most of them are going to be opened up, but I just enjoy seeing them on their backing card. One that I kept packaged a little bit longer than I probably should have was the HK-87 Assassin Droid from the Ahsoka series. This one is VC294, and the reason why I'm kind of regretting leaving it in its package for as long as I did, the new wave that arrived here in New Zealand included VC330, the newer version of the HK-87 Assassin Droid. And as you can see, I've already opened this one up. I was so excited to get a hold of new Vintage Collection figures here in New Zealand. I dove straight in and opened this one up, but that meant I didn't have the older version on hand out of the packaging to compare the two side by side. So it's time to fix that and open this one up so I can finally see the two HK-87 droids from the Ahsoka series side by side. I can't wait. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll finally get the figure out of the bubble so we can go over all of the details and accessories. But first, let's take one last look at the backing card. The backing card for the Vintage Collection takes heavy inspiration from the original packaging of the Kenner Star Wars action figures from the 1970s and 80s. We've got the Star Wars logo here with the single chrome racetrack surrounding the character art here to the right, and we have the Ahsoka series. I absolutely love this logo here in red at the top. For this particular HK-87 Assassin Droid, we have this vibrant green color used behind the figure, and for the title plaque there, we can see the black font reads HK-87 Assassin Droid. We have a single figure here with two accessories, a long staff weapon and a blaster rifle, and we also have a soft goods cloak. Very keen to check that one out. Soft goods generally looks pretty cool out of the packaging, a little bit better than we have it sitting here in the bubble. It's a little bit skewed to the left of the figure here. And to the right of the bubble, we have the character art here. Now, this does look like a render rather than an on-set thing because, of course, I'm pretty sure these were computer generated in the show. And we can see that it is posed holding the blaster rifle accessory in two hands. We can see the cape there as well. I have to admit, it is a little bit on the darker side for character art. I like being able to see the details, so when I've got it on display, I can really see. And from a distance, it does read very well, but sometimes when you put it alongside other figures, it just reads a little bit darker, but it is nice and clear. I can see the details on the droid very well when I look up close. On the back, now of course, this is VC294, where we still had that older backing card style for the Vintage Collection that was more inspired by the original backing card backs from the Kenner vintage packaging style, where we have the Star Wars logo, the twin chrome racetrack, and preview items of some of the other figures there that we can see other figures that were released around the same time, like Morgan Elsbeth, of course, a very good match for the HK Assassin Droids. And unfortunately, of course, we do have a lot of barcode, copyright text, all of that kind of stuff. I wish this was shrunken down a little bit. Certainly the old Kenner ones did not have quite as much sort of copyright text on the back there, but modern times, we've got a lot more warning and safety labels that we have to have printed on the backing cards. So this one is the original HK-87 Assassin Droid. As I mentioned earlier, we now have a second version that was released for us here in New Zealand in the most recent wave. This one is VC330. So comparing the two from the front, you can see I've already opened this one up, so I don't have the figure on the bubble there. And I think it's really interesting to see the differences here. This one is a lot lighter in terms of the character art there, posed with the staff weapon as opposed to the blaster rifle there. And we've also got a completely different color here. Of course, this one being the first one, they used a green color because red would be too close to the body of the figure. But I'm interested that they didn't just carry green on for the second one. They've treated this one as like a completely different character. Usually colors follow characters across different packaging styles, but this one being the Arcana version of the HK-87 Assassin Droid, they have given a completely different color for the accent and for the title plate. This one is white font, black font. And yeah, it's just really fun to see the differences there. And of course, the back as well. If I turn this one around, these were released on different sides of that swap by Hasbro to the new backing card style. So now we have the accent color covering the top half of the backing card. We have the front of the backing card pictured here on the back with a posed image of the figure loose out of the packaging. We can see it holding the accessory, and we now have character blurbs on the backing cards there as well. So we can see them side by side. We're generally not going to display our figures facing towards the back, but it is interesting to see them side by side. I kind of like both. I know some people will be very nostalgic for the one that's more inspired by the original Arcana backing cards, but I do like having the pictures here of the action figures posed with accessories. Sometimes it gives me an idea about some of the sort of poses and the accessories that I can see. Sometimes things are a little bit hidden when they're in their bubble card, but yes, really excited to finally get these two out of the packaging, because even just from the character art here on the backing card, we can see that the droids are very different in their colors and the accessories. This one didn't come with a blaster rifle, and this one does. So I'm very keen to see what is similar and what is different with these two figures. So let's get stuck in and open this one up. So now I have the HK-87 Assassin Droid figure and the two accessories out of the packaging, so we can go over all of the details. And first thing first, the cape is really long. Not usually that common to find Star Wars action figure capes that actually extend below the feet. Usually they are cut really nicely, so they're just above the display level, a desk, shelf, wherever you're putting your figures. This one, I know I can shift it around a little bit, but naturally straight out of the packaging, we can see it's very long and actually hitting the surface here, a little bit shorter here, which I think is really interesting. Of course, we've got a fabric that's pretty common for capes with these figures. It's a sort of it looks almost like a very thin cotton t-shirt, which is very soft. I find these ones good for not creasing. You can see it's kind of a little bit thin. You can see through it when we've got light on both sides, but it means that it drapes well because it's a little bit thinner. The thicker fabrics, they hold their shape and they just sit where they are. We've got a lot of gathering going on along the top here. It's really quite interesting. So looking up close, it is black fabric, so sometimes the seams are hard to see, but we have a gathered sort of seam here on the side and a seam here on this other shoulder. So we've got a section, sort of, a bit of a scarf here across the front of the chest, attaching to this large cape section down the back. So it swings around the shoulders, and that means that I can actually move it around to get a little bit of a placement. If I kind of want to do it sort of asymmetrical and over the arm, I can do it like that, or I can move it so it's a little bit more balanced and sort of cover the torso up a little bit. We can change the placement, but again, very long. You can see it is still just whatever way, even though I've been sort of moving it around, it does hang a little bit longer here on the side. But unlike some other capes, sometimes you can take some careful scissors to hem it up to your preferred sort of shape and length. This one has a really unusual sort of crinkle cut to the bottom of the hem, which is kind of hard to replicate. I know you can get sort of crimping shears, but those are much more of a tight zigzag cut used to kind of help stop fabric fraying. This one is a little bit more of a curved sort of ripple effect, which looks really fun, a little bit more like a weathered, but it's not sort of giving that real frayed effect, which I really quite like. Sometimes when they do these kind of tattered hem ends, you end up with lots of little fibers that are coming off the minute you get them out of the box. This one looks really nice and it looks really tidy, which I really like. And to be honest, because it's got a little bit more of an asymmetrical worn look, it doesn't really bother me that this is a little bit asymmetrical, a little bit longer on this side. I think it looks really cool. I'm always a big fan of soft goods elements for action figures, for capes and cloaks. I find that it just drapes a lot cooler, and I think it gives a good balance to the figure as well. Those big plastic capes and cloaks sometimes make figures very hard to pose because they simply just sit there as being a big lump of plastic. And looking at this figure, It's not tightly sewn around the head of the Assassin Droid here as well. We've actually got quite a wide neck opening, so that does give us a little bit more wiggle room in terms of placement, and it's not catching around on the underside of the neck, which is good. Sometimes I get worried if I want to swivel it around that I'm going to really catch around that neck opening and perhaps rip or damage the soft goods fabric, but that's really cool. So I have opened up the newer version of this, so there are some elements that I do want to check out, namely the one of the back of the newest one has this little attachment point there, and at testing, the staff weapon that the other droid has doesn't fit in this, so I assumed that it was because this was for holding the blaster rifle that came with the original version, which is this one. So I can see that we have an attachment point here that we're hopefully going to be able to fit the blaster rifle on the back, sort of holstered like the battle droids from the Phantom Menace, kind of having the blaster rifle there. And because we can move the cape around, of course, we might need to move the cape over so that it's not in the way of the blaster rifle if we choose to pose it there on the back. So that's kind of fun. So overall, really cool cape. I like that I can sort of move it around, position it just right, and I feel it does a pretty good job of replicating what we see in the character art on the backing card, where we've got that asymmetrical drape being a little bit heavier on the left side, and I like that I can move it around and pose it how I want. Really important if you want to do different poses with the different weapons, because of course characters will hold a staff weapon very differently to a blaster rifle, and this character comes with both, so we're going to have lots of options for cool poses. On the back of the backing card, the little tiny preview picture of this figure alongside all of the others has the figure holding the staff weapon in the right hand and the blaster rifle in the left hand there. So I'm keen to try and see what that looks like later on. But for now, to check out the articulation and the painting and sculpting of the droid figure, I'm just going to very carefully remove the soft goods cape. It's often just a little bit easier to get it out of the way. So let's just carefully take that off over the head. We can take a look at some of that stitching there. Nice and tidy. We've got all those tiny little gathers there. Really nice. Of course, I'm looking at it on the inside, so this is what it looks like taken off the figure. We've got that sort of little scarf section there in the front, and that'll slip on over the head nice and easy. I like it when I can remove accessories like that without having to remove the heads. I don't like doing that. I have a little bit of a paranoia about breaking the joining pieces of action figure accessories, particularly around heads and wrists. Those tend to be the places where Hasbro seems to want us to swap accessories, and I don't like stressing the attachment points. I really don't want to break my figures. So let's go over the painting, the sculpting, and the articulation of this figure. I love HK-87 droids, of course, a nod to one of my favorite Star Wars droids, HK-47 from Knights of the Old Republic video game. Of course, looks very different, but I kind of like the reference there, and assassin droids are always formidable. So we've got a really cool sort of head, helmet, if you will, going on here, and a little bit more of a two-tone paint scheme. The newer version has a little bit more different in terms of paint scheme. We've got a very sort of dark burgundy, a beige, and a grey. This one, we just have two colours, really. This slightly brighter red, and I will compare the two shortly as well. And then we've got a metallic grey, which is pretty cool. So we're going to have a little bit more of a simpler paint scheme because we generally only have those two colours, but we can see there is a lot of mixing going on here. It's not just sort of in a few block places. We've got a lot of accent paint going on all over this figure, and it looks a little bit cleaner and easier to see when I've got that soft goods robe on. So I think for the most part this is probably going to be made in that red plastic, though it is hard to tell because we've just got a lot of mix and match here. But on some of the pieces I can see, like the chest here, that definitely looks like a metallic paint there. But on these arm pieces, I think that might be made out of the grey plastic and the red paint here. But because we've got red paint and grey paint and mixing and matching, sometimes you can really tell because the paint color doesn't match the plastic color. But here, this painted sort of upper arm is a really good match for the red plastic pieces, which is really good. I almost have to study it for a while to make sure that those are different. I can see that sort of just subtly, sort of slightly different. plastic surface texture compared to the slightly glossier sort of texture of the paint there. But that's a really good color match. Sometimes it really sticks out. You can see they've tried to match paint and plastic and it doesn't quite happen there. Really nice. Looks like we've got maybe some subtle differences in plastic here, just between the sort of groin piece here and the ab plate. There's just a subtle difference in colors there, but not enough that it's really grabbing my attention. You know, sometimes it's just slightly different batches of plastic from the factory. You get that tiny little difference there. So overall, because droids do tend to be something that is slightly easier to paint, you know, when you're looking at human faces, if the eyes or the hair is off, it just really catches your attention. There's not actually that much in the way of paint going on with the head for this one. We've got some really cool sculpted details, especially here in the back. We've got all the sort of droid components there and sort of the interesting sort of voice modulators and sort of visors and things going on at the front, but we've only got one actual little painted element, this little silver dot here. Looking in, I don't even think the visor, if the visor is painted, because it is a little bit glossier than the rest of the plastic, so it might be painted, but it's pretty much the same perfect match in color to the rest of it. So very tidy there. Then of course we've got gray with those fun little droid components there on the neck. Really nice there. We can see that in the back. Now the chest looks like we've got red plastic with a lot of grey accents. We've got some weathering, which is always fun. Silver sort of weathering and accents here. We've got some little dings here that are accented with paint as well. And we've got some here on the back, including this little square here on the little sort of backpack piece as well. And moving down, we've got again a mix of plastic and painted components, but everything looks really tidy. I like it when we have the sort of articulation points of droids accented in different colors. It just sort of really helps. Of course, you don't really need to work too hard to hide the articulation of droids because it's kind of built into their design. So they always work really well as action figures. So we can see the sort of elbow joins there, the wrists. We've got the accents here at the hips, a little bit more hidden here at the knees because of the darker tone at the bottom of the legs, and then here at the ankles there as well. We've got a little bit of an overlap here with colors again. We've got some red accent paints here on just below the knees. That's really nice. That looks pretty tidy as well. Really nice. Very tidy. Now this one, there were a few on store shelves. Of course, army builders like this, you do hope that they're not too hard to find, but generally when I was looking at it on the store shelf, I could not see a difference. The painting on this one I found for me here in New Zealand to be quite consistent between the figures, so I just grabbed one with the nicest backing card because I kind of have a hierarchy of things that I'm looking for. If I have the option, I'll look at the figure first and then I'll look at the backing card if I'm opening them up. Sometimes the backing card raises higher in my priority list if I know I'm not going to be opening it up. But this looks really nice. Just a really cool droid. I like all that painting detail. It's just really nice and tidy. So, of course, like usual, droids sometimes need a little bit of help with standing up because this one in particular has some slender legs compared to some of the more human characters, particularly when we get to the lower bottom here. It'll be interesting to see, like I did manage to get him to stand up with the soft goods cloak, but when we start moving the limbs around, getting them to hold accessories away from the body, sometimes it can throw them off a little bit, but we do have some very good articulation points. Droids in particular, they don't have bulky armor, generally speaking, so we don't have too much that's really going to impact the movement range. So we should be able to get, you know, a pretty good range of movement. You know, we can see the hips here are very exposed. Absolutely nothing is encroaching there. So that should be easy to move around. She just looks really cool. Okay, so I'm really happy with the paint job. Let's move on to the articulation. So just testing out the head. We've got a very thin neck here. You can kind of see there. Of course, they don't need quite as much thickness as humans do. So very nice, turning it to the side, looking at their target, and a little bit of up and down as well. Nice there. Of course, we don't have any hair or anything restricting movement like we do on some characters. So just moving that around, I can already see that mid-torso articulation point there. Sometimes on some figures, this can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes it just wants to fight its way back to the neutral position. This one, I can swivel it and it is holding its position fairly well. To the left, to the right, again, holds its position. Sometimes, yeah, it's even holding it just a little bit off center. That's pretty good. I'm not really getting a lot of backwards and forwards, because you can see the way that this gray abdomen part is sculpted. It really wants to fit in with the shape of the chest. And on the back here, this chest beat is kind of overlapping here. So it's not really going back much. I can kind of click it backwards and forwards. We're not really getting, it's not really staying in a particularly sort of hinged position. It just kind of wants to sit there. I can click it backwards and forwards, but it's not really changing the angle of the torso much. But side to side, that feels good. And it's not exposing too much awkwardness. We can see we've got a nice sort of flatter surface here, but it doesn't look like I'm exposing sort of the inner workings of the toy. Let's test out the arms. So we do have shoulder plates here, which generally speaking are only attached with sort of like a little strip here at the top. So they will sort of fling or swing, I should say, up a little bit to allow us to move the arms. But generally speaking, for droids, I don't mind when armor pieces kind of move up on humanoid figures. But for droids, this is kind of part of the arm, though Hasbro obviously has to make it the same way. So I do like it if it feels like it's matching with the arm. When I put the arms up like that, it kind of looks like worn armor rather than a droid component. So it starts to look a little bit different to me. I think if this were a droid, it would actually kind of move more with the arm. I do really like the sculpting of that ring around the arm. That looks really droid-like to me, and I just like the sculpting on that. There's just a nice detail there. But of course, Hasbro does have to follow the design that they see on screen and turn it into a toy that can move around. So you can see as I go up, we're starting to get a tight angle on that shoulder piece. And I don't like the way that this looks compared to on this one. Though, of course, staff weapons, you tend to be a little bit more dramatic with the way that you move your arms compared to blaster rifles. These droids do use staff weapons, so we do want a pretty good range of motion. And I can get the arm to about there in terms of height, which is much higher. Generally, I can get characters to raise their arms to sort of, straight across. This one is very high. And of course, we can swivel around and we can see it looks a little bit awkward, but the shoulder piece is now pivoting with the arm and it's now on the underside. So if I want to go all the way up, this looks a little bit odd. Not my favorite, but I do like that we can completely rotate it around. And that piece moves with it, which I guess makes sense. It just looks a little bit funny having what I think of as shoulder armor being on the underarm there. So figures straight out of the packaging they do tend to have a little bit of tight joints, and the droids in particular have very small articulation points. So I'm just going to be very careful because I don't want to snap any of the little plastic peg and join pieces there. So I can get the elbows to a nice angle there, not any tighter because we have got those two pieces hitting each other in this position, but we should be able to rotate them outward like that, like usual, pretty much what I'm expecting there. And of course, we've got some nice rotation here on the hands. Now, both hands have got some pretty good sculpting in terms of the grips. Now, this one, the trigger finger is not extended. It's kind of sculpted slightly further out from the rest of the fingers, but looking at it from the side, it is not separate from the rest of the fingers. It's kind of sculpted a little bit like this, not like this, like we often see with figures. So I'm hoping that's not going to be too much of an issue with the included blaster rifle, because sometimes blasters have a little sort of trigger guard that's a complete circle, so you need a separate finger in order to really insert it in there. And we've got a similar thing going on here with the left hand, where that top finger looks just a little bit different. little bit separate there, but it's not a true separation. So I'm hoping that both hands will be able to hold both weapons, so you've got all of those options. I'm very keen to test out those accessories. So just checking out the arm, it's going to do the same sort of movement, of course, a little bit stiff as usual, but yeah, looking pretty cool. Very good. Okay, so the hips should be able to move in most directions, but just looking at it, the hip piece on the outside here does come up a little bit higher than the join. So I don't think we're going to get a lot of kicks to the side completely, because I think it's just going to hit there. So you can see that plastic is already touching. But in terms of swiveling around to the front, of course, just a little bit stiff, we can go pretty high. There we go, all the way up, very high kicks there. And he sort of holds position about there. Probably once I play with him a little bit more, he'll hold those tighter positions well. But yes, not too much of a kick out to the side. It's just this higher thigh piece is just hitting here. So, but that's about, I like the kicks to the front. I generally don't make my characters kick out to the side too much. And to be honest, I don't generally have them kicking like this anyway. I generally have most of my vintage collection figures with humanoid style legs just standing on two legs there, but it does help to get them balanced when I can just move and tweak all of these little movement parts. So we also have that sort of mid-thigh join here where we can swivel the thighs to the outside and inside there, which does help. Of course, you know, you can sort of position the way that the legs are facing outwards and inwards there. Now, this particular droid design does have a very prominent sort of sculpted line down the front. But to be honest, because we also have a little bit of a sculpted line horizontally, it doesn't bother me as much when I turn it to the side there, because we've actually got a little bit of a sculpted line. So it kind of looks like these are two separate pieces, because sometimes, especially on human characters, if there's sculpting going down the thighs, it breaks the illusion when you swivel them to the side, because suddenly the sculpting looks like you've cut it. Because we've got these sculpted details on here, it looks like the droid can just articulate, because this is not a place where humans can just, you know, just move their thighs in this direction. It's not really something we do. You know, we've got the standard sort of anatomical places where we can move our limbs, but for droids, it makes perfect sense. So I really like that we've got that option, even though it does split that sculpted line, because we've got the details running around the seam line. It looks really good. I don't mind it. Even there on the back, we can see the sculpting kind of joins up there as well. Nice, tidy. I like the way everything's looking on this droid. All the paintwork, the details, just looking fantastic. Of course, very similar to the newer one, but it's just fun to see that the original has the same things that I like about the newer version as well. So testing the knee, again, a little bit stiff out of the packet, but he holds that really nicely. And let's see about that ankle. There we go. A little bit of a kick there as well, which does really help. Nice grip there. I don't like it when it's really tight. Sometimes I feel like it's fighting with me. And of course, when it's loose, it does start to affect the stability on the whole. Now, he does have pegs on the underside, but I have found that most of my vintage collection figures don't fit my standard Star Wars stands. I'm going to have to track down ones with slightly smaller peg holes, because these newer generation ones just don't fit my standard clearest stands, which is annoying. I wish Hasbro was just a little bit consistent to help us collectors out, because action figures, they need a little bit of help standing up so they don't domino over. So I'm really happy with this figure. Looks really nice. Okay, so before I put his cape back on, let's just test out those accessories. So we have this really cool long staff weapon. The way that the staff weapon is generally pictured and packaged is slightly asymmetrical. We have a longer tip here compared to the lower tip here, and it's generally pictured with this one being the sort of attacking end held upwards. So that's how I'm going to put it into the character hand. Now, it is sculpted from a dark gray, and it's got a little bit of flex to it, but it's not overly bendy, but it doesn't feel fragile. I don't worry too much about putting this this into the figure's hand. This one feels pretty much identical to the one that comes with the newer figure, which I'm hoping they are identical because of course I want to army build these HK-87 droids and I want them to look like they've got similar weaponry when I put them all together. So again, I'm hoping that this one will hold it, of course, as well as the other figure did. So I'm just going to go with the sort of the center here of the staff weapon. Click that into the hand very nicely there. So we can get, now again, just tweaking very gently, we can hold it to very good positions there. That looks quite nice. Very cool. Now, sometimes it takes a little bit of work to get characters into a two-handed position. Let's just see if I can sort of pop this in here gently with those little fingers of this droid holding on. Can kind of get it. He kind of wants to let go of one side then the other. That'll take a little bit of work to get them in there. Of course, they're always just a little bit of a fight straight out of the packet because their joins are a little bit stiff. Let's give that another go. See if I can get that into a two-handed grip. I'm not sure the hands really want to. They're a little bit angled. So I'm kind of fighting with it to go straight across, but I might be able to get that with a little bit of work later. Yeah, they kind of tip a little bit, but I still like it and I think it looks pretty cool in a single-handed grip. But of course, I've already tested this one out on the latter version that came out recently. What the most recent version didn't have is the blaster rifle, so this is fun. Of course, this is very recognizable. This looks like the battle droid rifle that we see in the Phantom Menace and the Clone Wars and the prequels. It is made from what looks to be a pretty standard flat black. There isn't like a speckling, there isn't paint, it's just a black plastic there. But we've got some nice cut-ins here. You can see that top rail is separate, not molded in. I dare say Hasbro has made a lot of this blaster rifle in the 3.75-inch line. It's probably something that has been mass-produced a lot. It's probably going to be the same sort of accessory we've seen for many years. But let's test out to see how well this character is going to hold it, because we can see that this one doesn't have the tight sort of trigger finger trigger guard. It's got this larger one, which probably means that this not having a separate trigger finger is not going to be an issue. But sometimes these loops do get in the way. We've kind of got to come in from the side. So let's see how easily I can get it into the hand of this particular figure. Hoping it's not going to be too much of a mission there. Okay, so we can see how the hand is kind of gripping around the grip of the blaster rifle there. That looks pretty good. That wasn't too much of a fight to get that in the hand, just a sort of a gentle push. And it looks pretty cool. I can get that in a pretty good pose there. So now we can see the way that these hands, they're generally posed for sort of a two-hand rifle, sort of blaster rifle effect. So let's just see if I can quickly, if I can get the thumb. It's always the thumb that just wants to fight. Let's see if I can get this into a two-handed grip like it is in the character art on the thing. Okay, that thumb just needs to move. See if I can get this in. It's kind of working. The thumb wants to fight me a little bit. So I can kind of get it gripping like that. It's reasonably cool. That's just a really quick attempt. You know, I like to spend a little bit of time working on my poses before they go on permanent display. But that looks pretty good. That wasn't too hard. Just getting that little thumb just to flick around the side at the end there of the blaster. Really cool. Looks great. Of course, to get the cape on, we don't have a spot to really put this if he's holding the blaster rifle in two hands, because of course we've got this little storage section here as well. But I don't mind. Sometimes it's fun when you've got army builder figures to have them in different configurations, you know, especially if they have such different weapons, you know, staff weapons, blaster rifles. I think he looks really cool because I didn't get to test this out with that latest version because it doesn't come with the blaster rifle. I thought it was a shame, even though the backing card doesn't picture it. It would be kind of fun at just, you know, throwing us another freebie accessory, considering that this one had one as well. But anyway, looks really cool. Okay, I kind of want to leave him like this, but I do want to test this in that little holster section there because I didn't have a blaster rifle with my other version to test it. So we'll take that out for a minute. So I think this rail here looks like the most useful spot to attach it. And I'm just going to give it a gentle push, probably at one of those attachment points there. Okay, just a gentle sort of push, and it fits on there really nicely. Very cool. So you can sort of stow the blaster rifle there on the back if you're going to put the staff in the hand. Looks really cool. Though, as I mentioned earlier, of course, with this being here, that cape is going to sit a little bit differently. So I'm just going to put the arms down and let's get his cape back on so we can get him sort of fully assembled here. Just put his hands back around. So I'm hoping this will be just as easy to put on the cape as it was to take it off. And see how this fits with that blaster rifle. It's possibly going to sit just a little bit funny because that's off to the side. So it's a lot more sort of askew and kind of covering the left arm there. But it's kind of fun. It's giving me sort of General Grievous Magna Guard sort of asymmetry there with the cape. It's not too bad, really. I can still get the accessories on. So you could use all of the included components with the soft goods, the blaster rifle, and the staff weapon. The one thing, of course, about this small action figure scale is that they don't have quite as much articulation going on with the hands, but I think I can still get a pretty good pose here. There we go. There's all of the pieces all assembled with just a very quick pose, nothing too sophisticated, but that looks really cool. Okay, so let's get him properly assembled and we'll just see, because I just want to make sure that the cape looks just as good having been taken off and put back on as it did when he first came out of the packaging, because there's a little bit of stitching going on here. There we go. Of course, it's got a little bit of dust there. Looks good. Really fun. I do like the way that it fits over the shoulders. I think pulling it back to have the blaster rifle clipped, you've got to pull it quite a lot over. I think I just like the way that it kind of hugs over this shoulder. Feels a little bit more proper. But I do like the fact that we've got a place to stow that blaster rifle if you want to, but looks cool. Okay, so the last thing I just want to test out is how well it can hold the weapons in the left hand, because on the back of the backing card we could see that it was pictured holding a weapon in its left hand as well. So hopefully, if I can put this one down, that this left hand will hold the blaster rifle just as easily, because sometimes the left hands are not always sculpted the same. So this one's a little bit tighter. Those fingers are not going in the way that I want them to. Just going to spend a minute because I really want to get it holding in the left hand, and I think I can. So with a little bit of work, I can make the figure hold the weapons as seen in that small preview image on the back of the backing card. The fingers on the left hand are just a little bit tighter of a grip, but with a little bit of work, you can get it to hold the blaster rifle in the left hand. And of course, the staff works in either hand. Looks really cool. Now with two weapons ready to take on any foe, looks fantastic. So I'm just going to test out to see how well this is going to stand up now that we've got all of those accessories in place there. Yay! Little bit unsteady, but we've got a balance there. Of course, I'm going to work on that a little bit before I go and add it to my display shelf. Looks fantastic. I love that cape. And of course, we've got two weapons there. So I'm just going to take the staff weapon and the blaster rifle out of the hand because I really want to compare this particular HK-87 droid to the more recent one. I did unbox them a little bit backwards. I know, I was just so excited to get a new figure. So here is the more recent one. This is VC294, and of course the first thing that we can really see is the difference in the design. The figure itself is the same with a different color and paint scheme, but we have a very different soft goods cape. This one has a similar construction to the front, but it's not very asymmetrical. It's not designed to come down over this left shoulder, and we can see that we have a much shorter hem that's cut on an angle. So already they are looking very different. really cool. The colors, seeing them side by side. So we can see that this one has a red visor, and actually looking at them side by side, I can't tell if that red is the same or not. It's definitely making me think that that is painted perhaps to sort of match this. But this one's just giving me a darker red color compared to this one. A little bit hard to tell. But of course we can see the sculpting looks pretty much the same. Even here when we've got different paints, you can just see the sculpting details beneath the paint. Interesting that the reds are so different as well, seeing them side by side. This one kind of looks red until you put it next to this one. This one definitely looks more red. This one's definitely more sort of like a wine, a darker color, but they look really cool seeing them together. Fun. We don't often get unique droids like this with so much difference, despite the fact that the actual base droid is the same plastic sculpt. Of course, easy for Hasbro to make multiples. There's only, I think there's like less than just maybe about 30 odd VC numbers between these two, a 294 and 330. Kind of interesting that we got another one so quickly, but I loved the Ahsoka series. I absolutely have no problem with getting more of these figures from the show. Really cool. I need more bad guys from Ahsoka. I'm really looking forward to the vintage collection, Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. I need more characters from Ahsoka. These guys look really cool together. One little thing is, I know this one, the cape looks really thin, and I've got, some extra lighting here that's not really going to be quite as well lit when I put this one on display. I'm hoping that it will look just a little bit more darker when I've got it, up against a display with sort of things around it. It's just when there's so much light surrounding it that it does look kind of thin. I can see a lot through it, especially when I'm sort of holding these two together. It looks a little bit thinner compared to this one, because we just don't have the volume. It's a little bit more gathered behind the figure. It sort of helps to block light out a little bit, but they look really cool. Really enjoying these figures. So fun finally seeing them together. I was really not expecting to find this one, VC294, so soon here in New Zealand, so I just hadn't gotten around to opening up my earlier one, so I had it ready on hand. I just charged straight in and opened this one up. I was so excited. I just got stuck straight in to open it up, but now I have both of them side by side. I think I've learned a lesson here. Don't wait too long to open up your figures, because you never know when you want them loose to complete a scene with the new figures. I gotta get on and open up more of my Ahsoka figures, because we've got some really fun characters. I gotta build my display up, so I'm all ready for those fantastic new ones that are going to be coming out this year and next. I love the Ahsoka series, trying to collect them all from the vintage collection line. This was a lot of fun. Of course, because I had opened this one, I knew what I was going to have opening up this one. I knew I already liked the figure, the articulation, the paintwork and stuff like that, but the accessories were a little bit different, especially the soft goods cape, and just kind of fun just to see them side by side, even though there's not really too much of a difference there. I do kind of wish that the newest one did include the blaster rifle, just so we have the options. I know sometimes Hasbro can be sticklers. If we don't see this specific, droid with this paint scheme holding a blaster rifle, they're like, well, that's not what we see on screen, so you don't get the extra little accessory. But, this one has it. Sometimes you just want to create, a bit of a pose scene that might not be exactly what's seen on screen. It's a pretty standard accessory. I don't think it would have cost them too much to include with the new one, but at least we've got it with the original one, so you can just take this one and give it to the new one if you want to do a bit of a mix and match. And of course, now that I have them both on hand, we can compare the weapons. This one is the new one, VC330. This one is the old one, and they are identical. The plastic looks the same, all of the details. Just good to just double check that. So overall, really fun. I love these droids. I love the capes. They just look cool. Always fun to add more vintage collection figures to my collection, and I'm hoping to add more Ahsoka figures to my collection very soon as well. This was a lot of fun opening them up, doing a bit of comparison, and just having fun celebrating one of my favorite Star Wars shows, Ahsoka. They just look great together. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars vintage collection figure, checked out the details, did some comparisons, and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a vintage collection fan, I recently opened up the Chopper figure VC304. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.